What does a Native American look like in movies? A majority of people would recognize this. A man with darker skin wearing an outfit of buckskin, maybe with the fringe and stylized pieces. Moccasins adorning his feet and braids in his hair. Sometimes with a headdress adorned with feathers. This image of an Indian comes from decades of film that portrays a singular type. Often violent, a negative view of a group of people that enforces stereotypes that harm a whole group. But there is so much more than the stereotype in real life. And today I would like to take you through a different lens of study, into the Native American woman in film.
Hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, hey, we are, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh.
Through the past 50 years or so, Native American narratives in film have fit into three main categories of film. One is the prop, where Native Americans are nothing more than props or plot devices. Think John Wayne, The Searchers, Tonto from The Lone Ranger, the environment which grew the stereotypes we discussed before. Although critical in creating a stereotype, these films have little to no real voice, narratives, or ideas that are based in actual Native cultures. So we move on to the next. 2. The white man playing Indian. Films like 1970's Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman, 1990's Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner, and 1992's Last of the Mohicans. All of these films star a white man who has somehow found his way into being involved in a Native American tribe. These movies, although sometimes accurate in depicting real Native culture, relies heavily on the narrative and lens of a white person. I believe that the filmmakers were attempting to use a white protagonist to connect with white audiences. But these films fail as the white voice holds the power in the story. Instead of allowing those who are actually Native to talk about themselves, this genre controls the narrative and themes in the story. Let's take Dances with Wolves, for example. One of the most popular films that has ever depicted Native Americans, the characters' lives and events are accurate to history. But the film is written and directed by Kevin Costner, a white man. This film is really nothing more than a self-insert dream of a little white boy wanting to play Indian. The film aims to have Kevin Costner's character as a median between the white audience and Native people, but instead it depicts only a white understanding of a story that is not his to tell. The film is not an appreciation of Native culture or people, but a white savior complex on the big screen. The last type of film is called The Journey, exemplified by films like Powwow Highway and the infamous Smoke Signals. These films are accurate, realistic, emotional, and sympathetic to the Native experience. As Native actors and filmmakers began to develop a voice on screen that was finally controlled by them, a particular narrative style began to develop. Themes that were relevant to modern-day Natives were at the forefront of the scripts, effectively leaving behind the idea that Native Americans only existed in the past. Taking Smoke Signals, one of the most well-known Native American films on my list, no longer is the story based around events of the past, but instead about issues of modern-day American Indians. The film approaches issues of alcohol abuse, separation of land, money, and culture. All of these issues are discussed using Native storytelling and narrative styles. Predominantly, this is by a journey, by two young men in a car traveling to reach a goal. At the end of the journey, both men end up transforming, changing their understanding of their identity, environment, and each other. Although a huge step up from the racist, savage imagery from before, these films are still lacking in one large area: women.
Hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, hey, we are, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh.
Female narratives are notably absent in the films thus far. Focusing on men in the stories, women are usually seen as plot devices or love interests in order for the man's story to continue. Native women-centric narratives are even more difficult to come across. Even in Powwow Highway, The protagonist, Buddy Redbow, played by A. Martinez, only goes on the journey to save his sister. But his sister and her children are not the center of Buddy's story or his transformation at the end. They are a plot device, a reason for the men to leave and transform. A film that defined a change in this narrative was 2008's Frozen River. Frozen River is a film released in 2008 by Sony Pictures. Directed by Courtney Hunt, the film uses the female narrative to discuss female issues. The film begins with Melissa Leo playing a single white mother named Ray, and Misty Upham playing a Mohawk indigenous single mother named Leela. Although the film includes a white actor and character, unlike films like Dances with Wolves, which centered a white narrative in explaining Native issues, this film uses the white characters not as a mouthpiece for the film, but instead as an avenue of exploring interracial dialogue and relationships. At the beginning of the film, Ray's husband had left a few days before Christmas and had taken the money that she had saved in order to buy a new home. When she goes to the local casino looking for her husband, she spots Leela driving her husband's car. After chasing after her to Leela's trailer, she discovered that Leela had found the car at a bus stop, further cementing the idea that Ray's husband is not coming back. Ray threatens Leela to give the car back, but Leela ends up holding Ray hostage to drive in a smuggling deal. Ray finds out that Leela is a smuggler, and she needs a car to smuggle immigrants over the U.S.-Canadian border by crossing a frozen river on the reservation. Once the job is done, Ray returns to Leela as she has not been able to make back the money her husband stole. They decide to smuggle again, with Ray driving and Leela with her connections. Through their time, they get to know each other more, and they both begin to create a relationship. Ray learns that Leela has a son, but he was taken away by her mother-in-law, and she was trying to make enough money to get him back. Ray tells Leela about her sons and her dreams of buying a new home. Finally, they decide to go on one last trip together in order for Ray to finish her payments on the house. But as they pick up the immigrants, the people put a bag in the car with them. Suspecting that the bag contains drugs or other illegal things, they throw the bag out onto the ice as they cross the border. It's not until they get to the hotel to drop them off that they discover that a baby was in the bag. Leela and Ray are horrified and go back to the river even though it begins to melt. Once they get the baby, it is cold and not breathing. Ray is adamant in trying to save the baby, but Leela is sure that it is no use. After warming it up using a blanket, the baby begins to breathe again, and they return it to its mother. At the end of this experience, Leela seems to come to a realization and is determined to get her own son back. Quickly after these events, however, they are caught. If Leela is caught again, she will go to jail for a long time and lose all hope in getting her son back. But Ray decides to take the fall and receives jail time for them both. Ray then gets arrested, but as a white woman, she only gets a short time, and so she entrusts Leela in the care of both of their children and tells her to buy the new house for them all. This film is female-led and centers narratives which differ greatly from previous films. Powwow Highway and Smoke Signals, both hugely popular Indigenous-centered films who starred and surround male Native people. However, Frozen River uses similar themes of white-led films like Dances with Wolves, Little Big Man, and Last of the Mohicans. Combining both, this is to say that the film not only reiterates previously explored themes, while also extending beyond in a way that brings more definition to the story, allowing white and Indigenous connections without creating white-centric narratives, and also addressing Indigenous issues like law enforcement, discrimination, poverty, addiction, and law. The story also uses motherhood as a lens to create a connection not just in these two characters, but in the cultures represented by these women. This wonderful exploration of themes creates a complex, dynamic, and interesting relationship between the two leading ladies. The story, unlike others, uses women as living, breathing people and not as props for the men. The most disappointing thing about the film is that it is so underrated. The low quality and age of the film makes it obvious the lack of awareness that might have caused this, but I think it also stands for the lack of care that our society has for women's issues and especially Native women's issues. This is not just shown in the box office numbers, but also in the story of one of the leading actresses in the film, Misty Upham. The actress that played Leela was found dead at the age of 32. On October 5, 2014, Misty Upham went missing in Auburn, Washington. In the months leading up to her disappearance, she was struggling with mental illness and was taking multiple medications to help control her symptoms. After a string of events leading to Misty being admitted to a psychiatric hospital, her family suspected the police of brutality, as Misty was found with bruises, scratches, and marks after her release from police custody. After she had gone missing, her family tried to report it to the Auburn police, but the police didn't file a report until 24 hours later, and no official search was performed for 2 days after her disappearance. Although the police were aware that Misty may have been suicidal, they refused to call her case an endangered adult case, and claimed that she probably, quote, was off partying somewhere with her friends, unquote. After the police finally began a search, Misty's body was discovered on October 16th, but not by the police, but by some family friends that were searching. The King County medical examiner found blunt force trauma to her head and torso, but could not conclude the exact manner of her death. Due to the Auburn police's lack of action immediately after Misty's disappearance, she might have been able to be found earlier. Misty was found to have been extremely intoxicated when she died, and due to this it is believed that her death was caused by an accident, but due to the time between when she was reported missing and when she was found, it is extremely hard for anyone to be exact on the case. Overall, this case is extremely heartbreaking, as Misty Upham was a talented young woman who had so much ahead of her in life. But her story is not rare. According to the Association of American Indian Affairs, quote, more than 4 in 5 American Indian women and Alaskan Native women, or 84.3%, have experienced violence in their lifetime, unquote. And, quote, homicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among American Indian and Alaskan Native women between 10 and 24 years of age, and the 5th leading cause of death for American Indian and Alaskan Native women between 25 and 34 years of age, unquote. This is a very prominent issue for the Native American women across the U.S. Thus, Misty's story and the art that she had made should not be pushed aside. Not only was Misty Upham a wonderful actress, but she created films that highlighted the beauty, strength, and power of Native American women in society. Her story and others like hers should not go in vain, but instead should be celebrated and used to change things for the lives of others.
And mommy will never let you go to the stars and the sky. You'll always be mommy's little guy. Hey oh, hey oh, hey oh, hey oh, hey, hey oh, hey oh, hey oh, hey, hey oh, hey, hey way oh, hey, hey oh, hey oh, hey oh. Do you know I love you so, and mommy will never let you go to the stars and the sky. You'll always be mommy's little guy.